Hi guys, so today we're going to be looking at Microsoft Power Automate, previously called Flow, and integration into Teams for approval of documents. In this week's video we're going to look at how to pull in a dynamic list of approvers and also pull out some information from our Excel form that we're using for submissions to put it right in the approval step. If you haven't seen part 1 or the original video about what the end result looks like, you might want to watch at least part 1 before, if not the other video as well. I'll link both those in the description below. My name's Gavin Jones, I'm Transformation Manager for a Fortune 500 company, and all the tips we put on YouTube have come out of real life examples, this one included. Got a new video on Teams coming out every Tuesday, so hit the subscribe icon and the bell button to get notified every time I release a new video. And if you want to do some training into your organisation, or you just want some tips all written down in one place, make sure you click the free download button below to get the deck that we use for training. So without further ado, let's go and have a look at Teams and Power Automate for approvals. Okay, so the first part we're going to look at dynamic list of approvers. So what we want to do here is, rather than someone needing to go into the flow to change who the approval goes to, which we think is quite a relatively complicated thing for someone to train someone how to do, we're just going to set up a SharePoint list that's going to hold the list of approvers at each step in our approval flow. You can have multiple approvers going into it, as you'll see, but it just means that then if anyone moves roles or someone comes in, or we want just to change the process a little bit, we can just go into that SharePoint list, add the person, which links through to Active Directory, and add those quite easily, or change them or delete them or whatever you need to do, rather than going into the flow, finding the right bit and all that jazz. So that's what I'm going to do first. The second bit is we're going to have a look at what's coming out from Excel and try and pull it out. But for start all, we are obviously in the team that we're using, in the testing team. We've seen some of the flows that we've got posted back in from last week's video, part 1. And so the first thing we probably need to do is then go and set up a SharePoint list to hold that information of the approvers. So if you are completely alien to that, this is how we're going to do it. If you already know how to do that bit, you might want to skip ahead. I'll try, and if someone wants to put what the timestamp is in the comments, that'd be really handy for other people, I'm sure. So basically we're in the team, and we just need to get into the SharePoint view of the team, the files and all the associated libraries and things. So you can either go through your Office 365 login and just click SharePoint and navigate your way to the team, or if you're already in Teams, you can just go Files and open in SharePoint. So that's going to chuck you into SharePoint and the into the document library that you were happened to be in when you clicked View in SharePoint. As you might have known from some of the videos, the backing for Teams is just a SharePoint site, and you can do pretty much anything you do in SharePoint with a SharePoint site that's associated with the team, including adding new elements. So if I click New here, it's going to give me some things to do with documents, because I'm in the document library. If I go to Home or Site Contents, when I click New there, it's going to ask me what I want a new thing of, because in SharePoint you can have lists, document libraries, pages, news posts, blah blah blah. You can add a plan from there as well, or a Power App. So what we want to do is a list, but obviously you can do it from Home, which is what I've just done there. I'll just show you Site Contents, which is where it's going to show up when we do it, in case you did it by accident and lost it. Site Contents is where everything's going to appear. So all of our documents in the team are in a document library called Documents, and if we went through there, you can then see all the folders of each channel. We've obviously already done some testing, so we've got an escalation approvers list, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So whether you click New in Home or you click it here, we are going to create a new SharePoint list, and I'm going to call it test approvers. You can show it in the navigation, but if you're using your SharePoint site associate with the team for other things, you might not want to show it there. So for example, we're doing lots of news that goes out to our team via the SharePoint news associated with that team. We don't want test approvers sort of messing up our sidebar on the homepage, so we probably try and hide it and then just train people that if they want to change it, they need to go into site contents and find that list. Or you can pin that list into the team if you wanted to, which we'll do with the escalation tracker, but for now we'll hide the approvers list effectively by not putting it in the sidebar. So just click create, and that's just going to get you a blank list. So first of all, anything that you add into SharePoint, with a document library or just a normal list, they all work the same and they always get a unique ID, but they might not always display it. So you can see by default this list has just got title and then no other columns. So first thing we want to do is show hide columns. So if you can add another column with any of these options, show hide columns will then just show you what's hidden from the default that it's going to create for you anyway. So we want to tick ID because then we'll get a unique ID for anything we put in there, and that'll be useful when we come on to say which approval step are we at. So if we click apply there, we can see that then that adds ID in. If we drag that over, kind of want it to be at the front, and it looks like it's saved our view, which didn't used to do actually, so I'm not sure if that's brand new today, but usually you have to click all items, save view as, keep it the same name and click save. It seems to have saved what we've done already, because very frustrating, it usually doesn't save what you've done straight away, and if you drag it around and then leave the page and come back, it's forgotten what sort of view you set up. So we want ID, we want title, which is going to be just a naming convention that we use for that level of approval, and then we need a column that's going to add the person that we want to approve it, person or persons, I should say. So I'm going to call this approver, and it's going to be a person or group, and we want to probably allow multiple selections and require this column contains information, because we don't want an approval step that doesn't have a person to approve it. And add to all content types, I'm not entirely sure what that is, but I don't want it to be across all of our document libraries or anything like that, so I'm just going to turn that off and save that. If you know more about SharePoint, I'm sure you can let us know in the comments if that's a good thing to do or not, but that's what I'm assuming it does, so I always just turn it off and it seems to work. So we've got ID, title and approver. So then if we go and add a new line item to that, which is going to be ID number 1. So we'll call this just approval step 1. So this is setting up a list so we can have multiple approval steps. So say it needs to go to, I don't know, your boss first, and then his boss, and then her boss, and up through the chain. This is to set who's the approval at each step, and we want to be able to have multiple approvers, because it might not be someone's boss, it might be, I don't know, it needs to go to HR and 1 of 4 people could sign it off. So what we're setting up is it can go to all 4 of those people at the same time, and the first person to respond is the one that wins effectively, assuming they would all come up with the same decision. If not, you probably want to think about your business process more, I guess. But so approver, I'm just going to add myself, and you can see it searches the your company's directory for you. So you just start typing in a name and hit the person you want, and we could add multiple people there, and like I say, it would go on, and that's the point actually of having this list, is that you can change the multiple approvers quite easily. Still useful though to set this up even if it's a single approver, because like I say, you can go into the list and change that single approver without going into the flow. So we've got now 1 approval step, it's got an ID of 1, it's called approval step 1, and we've got 1 approver. Just going to add another one, just so we've got something to work with in the next video, so we don't have to come back into this bit. I'm going to add myself again as the approver so we can see it coming back into my view. If I add someone else, we won't be able to see what's going on. So I've got ID1 and ID2. If you ever wanted to edit those, you can do a quick edit, or you can just click into the step and edit the person that's the approver there. So we've got that set up. It's set up in the Teams SharePoint site. And we're going to go back into Flow. Oh, not edit mode, that'd be good. Back into Flow and then add this in. So at the moment, when we stopped last week, we'd got that assigned to me, which is obviously going to be the same thing in this example. When we pick up the list, it's still going to be me. But I'm going to make that a dynamic content so that we can pick from anyone on the list, and also I'm going to set it up so we can have multiple people on the list and it won't break. So if you set it up to just pull in one email and you pull in two, it won't know what to do unless you set it up correctly. So that's what we're going to do right now. I learned all this on the internet. I can't remember the link, so apologies that I can't attribute it to the person that I learnt it from, but it was very useful. So what we want to do first is, before we post a message saying it's been successful, we want to insert a new step, add an action, and we want to initialize a string variable so that we can hold a list of emails, basically, is all that this is doing. Hopefully it's going to search okay for me. Here we go, initialize variable. So the variable name can be anything, so we're going to call it approvers in step 1. The type we want is going to be a string, because that's just a list of text, and the initial value we don't need because there isn't one. I guess if you had a default approver, if everything else broke, you could put initial value in there, but we just want to leave it blank for now. So that's just setting up that there's a variable called approvers in step 1. We then need to go and add our approvers to that variable so we can use that variable in the approval step. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and get the list of approvers. So we need to get a SharePoint connector, and we need to get an item, get items, I think it is. We're going to pick the team that we're doing everything in, and we should have our list name now pop up. So we've got test approvers, which is the one that we just set up. Pick that one. Okay, so we need to go into SharePoint. And get item. Okay, so the one I did before was get items. There are a few things that are quite close together, but you see it's got some different options. So this one just is going to get every item out of the list. That might be useful, but the way I did it originally was just get item. I want one item. I already know the ID. I don't want to bring everything back and have to filter it. So I'm going to delete that get items one and go ahead with get item. So let's pick our team again. Get the test approvers, and then the ID we want is going to be ID1, which is why we wanted to pull that ID list into our view beforehand. I'm just going to make sure we saved that view, because it's really annoying when if you come out and go back in, it's not saved it. So we've got ID1, it's approval step 1, and the approver is me. Obviously it could be anybody. but that's going to pull back that item and pull back anything in it. So it's going to pull back the title and the approver, and that's going to make it so we can use that later on in our flow, which is going to be this next step, which we're going to append whatever's we've pulled back here into our variable. So we're going to append to string variable. So our string variable name is now visible from the drop-down menu because we initialized it up here. So it's going to be approvers in step 1, and then the value that we're going to put into that variable is going to be the person that we put in, which I think we called approver. So we're just going to pick out that list there. Well, actually, I think it's going to be approver email. So obviously there's lots of stuff coming from the Active Directory plugin. So when we added that person at person column, which is the approver column, I've named it here, which has lots of information we can pull back for that person. So we can pull back the department, display name, job title, the picture even, but it's actually the email that we need to feed into the approval step. So we're going to pull back approver email. And you see, as soon as I clicked that, this is how some flows end up looking quite complicated, even when they make sense as you're doing it. It then wrapped what we just did in an apply to each box. And that just means that it knows sort of what we're doing by what we've added in, and it knows that there could possibly be more than one email in the list of approvers that we just got from get item. So it's saying, well, I need to then append multiple, I need to run through that step as many times as there are emails to make sure I've appended all those emails into one list. And the bit that threw me out for quite a while is that we need to make sure that we've got a semicolon in that value, because it's going to append the email and the semicolon, then append another email, another semicolon, append an email, semicolon. If you don't have that, it's just got literally a list of emails back to back with no punctuation in, and it just assumes that's all one string of text, not separated emails like you would if you were writing an email and put a comma or semicolon in there. So that'll save you a lot of hassle to just remember to put that semicolon in. That might be the reason why it doesn't work. So that's all wrapped up. The string variable is going to pick up everything we want, and then when we go into the start approval, instead of just hard coding that name now, that email, we can now go and add dynamic content and pick the approvers in step 1 variable, which is what we've done up here, and then that's going to fill everything in. So now we've changed that, we can update the SharePoint list with whatever we want, and if we just go and do a quick test and run from the previous thing we submitted, that's just using the same file and the same trigger. It's still going to use the new flow. So if we test that, we can see if it's going to work for us. So it's got the item okay, it's done all the appending, posted a message to the team, and hopefully, if we're lucky, it's going to start the approval for us. Yeah, cool. So got the approval request pop up on my phone, and it's now sat at starting approval, and we know it's all working okay with the string variable that we just added in. So now we've got dynamic list. If you're wondering why we ended up with like 2 levels, that's if we wanted to put some more stuff down here. So if we went down to, if I go back to edit, if we went down to condition and we had multiple levels of approval, we could say if it's yes, then it's finished. If it's no, start another approval, and that'd be yes or no. If it's no, start another approval. That'd be yes or no, or yes, whatever, depending on your business processes. If it's yes, put it go to somebody else. If it's no, just finish it. And if in the yes box here, we then add an action with another approval flow, obviously we need the same steps, so we then have to initialize another variable, which will be approvers in step 2. Get the list of items again, and it would be ID 2 for the second level of approval. The apply to each would wrap itself again, but we'd append the approvers that we picked in from ID 2 into string name approvers in step 2 with the approver email and a semicolon, and we just repeat that down for multiple approval levels or steps. So that's how you'd end up with multiple stages of approval. I wasn't going to go through that in this video because obviously it takes a long time, and it's just the same thing repeating. And hopefully there's enough there that you'd be able to navigate your way through that if that's what you want to build. If you get stuck, put something in the comments and we can pick up via text chat in the YouTube comments. So that's the first part. That's getting a dynamic list of approvers and pulling it into our approval flow, which we know is now working pretty well. Second thing is that when we send the approval to our first lot of approvers in this bit, at the moment they're just getting a, although it's quite useful already, Power Automate link on their phone. They get an email and they can go into their approvals list via either the flow, either via Power Automate and action items, and they'll see all the approvals there, or via Power Automate in Teams. If we jump back and go into the 3 dots and flow, well, it's still called flow there rather than Power Automate, very confusing. If you go to flow there, you can see the list of approvals there as well. So it's already quite useful and go to multiple places to get your approval. We can still make it easier by populating what they see at the time they want to approve it with information that would help them know whether to approve it or not. So at the moment they just know who's approved it, what the title is, but they don't know anything about what's in that file. So we're given a link back to the file, which is useful, so they can click it and it'll open the relevant app and go to see what's in there. But we can do more with automation to pull out some key information and put it straight in the approval. So that's what we're going to do now. So what we probably want to do to start with is, if we go into our escalations folder, we want to create some sort of template that we know is repeatable, that has a table in it, which will help us out with not putting some of the automation in further down the line, so that Power Automate can pull out that information in the table easier. And then we'll tell people in the business to say, well, if you want to use this way of doing things, fill in this template, and then submit it into the submit folder like we've got our trigger already. So we're going to call this test approval template. And then I guess whatever your business process is, you can make this form as big and complicated as you want. You can have as much information on you want, but I guess always try and then summarize it back into a small table with formulas if you need to then more easily pull out some key data. So if I just start a quick 2-column table just to show you, so we'll call this one category, and I don't know, measure. So I guess you might want to know some approval. What brand are you talking about? What product is it for? Is there any volume that you need approving? What's the risk maybe? What's the status? Maybe reason, and have some drop downs. So obviously for all these you've got the full power of Excel. So if you want to do some drop down lists or do validation or whatever, you can obviously do that with your existing Excel knowledge. But for now, brand, we'll say, I don't know, brand 1, it's product X, volumes maybe 10,000, risks high if we don't do something about it, status, I don't know, with customer, and the reason is customer request, say. So whatever field makes sense for your process, basically. So we just need to make sure that's a table. So we can insert a table, make sure it's got headers on, and that's now formatted as a table. So Excel knows it's a table, and we can pull back some information using that table. In the main version of Excel, I think you get to name the table. Seems to be missing off the online version. So let's just open it in full Excel, just so that we make sure we've got the exact name of the table. Because if we don't do that, then it won't work. So if we go into table tools here, so yeah, cool. So we can see it's table 1, which is what I thought it was, but just wanted to make sure you knew where to find that name. You can name the tables anything you want to make sure you know what that table's doing. So now that table is called key info because we just typed over it. And if we save that back, it's going to be back in the team, and we can then use that to pull that information into our Power Automate flow. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that on screen so we know what things we're wanting to pull out. I'm just going to pull out a couple because you does need to repeat. I think there's a quicker way of doing this now. I'm not sure there was at the time I did it, but I'm just going to show you the way I did it originally. I'm about to build another flow for something else, and if I find a quicker way of doing it, I'll share that in another video. But if you just want to pull out some key data with a couple of data points, then this will work for you. So obviously above, we want to add it into the start and approval. There might be some stuff we want to put into the message back to the person that submitted it. So we're going to start inserting our Excel pull above this step so that we've got it to be able to use further down the flow. So we'll insert a step there, add an action, and some of these connectors change depending on where you've got your file saved, which is a little confusing now. Either you can do the same thing and it's called something slightly different, or there's genuinely differences in functionality about what you can and can't pull from. So whether it's saved in OneDrive or whether you're using it in SharePoint. So Excel Online Business is going to be in SharePoint, Excel Online OneDrive is going to be in your OneDrive, whether it's OneDrive for Business or OneDrive in your personal OneDrive. So obviously ours is saved in the team, which is SharePoint, which is going to be your Excel Online, which again is not particularly obvious if you're not that way inclined. And we are going to get a row. The thing I referenced before was a bit quicker might be list rows present in table, and then I think that pulls out everything in one go. But at the moment I'm just going to show you get a row. So when we first create this and pull things through into both these or to anywhere else you want to use it, we need to pick a static file so that Flow knows which fields and tables are available, and then can add those in later. Then you need to go back and then change this so it's a dynamic pickup, because we want to pick up the file that's been submitted here. But if we do that at the start, you won't be able to reuse some of the things we're getting out of the Excel file further down the flow. Hopefully that makes sense when you do it, which took me quite a while to see why it was breaking. But for now, right, we'll just go through step by step. So we are going to pick up the static file, which is the template. So we need to go and pick the team, pick the document library, which if it's a team, it'll always be documents. The file, we're going to just go use the picker. So as is in testing, escalations, and we called it test approval template. So obviously that's now just a static link. We don't want to pick up the template every time because we want to be able to pick the one that someone submitted. but for the purposes of setting it up, we need just a static one, because otherwise if we picked up that file by using the file here, that drop down for table wouldn't show any information. We could probably type it in, but then nothing, we wouldn't be able to pull in any dynamic content down here for anything we got in this step here. So we start off with a static view, and then we'll change it later. So the key column we want to get, so we're going to use key column category, so that's I guess which one we want to look up. In the key value, that's I guess what we're looking up for to get the entry in that row. So say at the moment we want brand, so we're going to type brand in there. So that's going to pull out that entire row. So what if we had multiple columns, we'd be able to use anything in that row. So we then want to pull back something that's going to give us brand 1 basically. So in our message, we're going to change that to so our mentions, your request has been approved, so please sit back, blah blah blah, and we can just add in something to say this is for brand, and then put some dynamic content in. So we can then choose the double check the measure of this getter row, and that's going to dynamically put in brand 1 hopefully, and then we can put the same thing or something similar in the details or even the title. So we can say review blah blah for, and then put the measure in there. This is for brand, and use dynamic content there. So now we've set that up, we can then go back and change this file to pick up which file when we created it. So if we delete that, add dynamic content, when we do get item, we're going to not get item actually, need to be careful now, because we've got two things. We've got one once the file's created and one to get item, and you need to make sure you're picking the step from the right, picking the dynamic content from the right step. So everything underneath get item is all from just this SharePoint list. So it might say there's an attachment there or a file or an ID. We don't want that ID because that's nothing to do with the file. So we want to pick something from when a file is created, which is this step up here, which is actually the trigger we've got, and when the file's then created. So we're going to pick up ID, which we know is an ID to the file because it's from this top step when a file is created. So if we put a file there as the file ID, then you can see the tables now changed to a weird list. Never sure whether you need to change this or not, but we know that it's table key info, and category and brand we can leave as is. The thing I was mentioning before is that now the dynamic content we're using beneath is still there. If we had this dynamic content up here and then went to add in dynamic content down here, you can see there's nothing appears from that Excel step, because that the flow at this moment in time hasn't inspected that file to know what's there to be able to pull out. So that's why we started using the template to be able to add this dynamic content in here. If we started with this ID here, obviously now we can't then say the measure. So that's a bit annoying. If you want to add in just another extra thing, which we've done a few times, you need to go back and pick up a static file in this step, then go and add in the dynamic content in steps, all the steps below, then go back to this step and change it back to the dynamic content, which is picking up the particular file that we had up here. Hopefully that makes sense, because it gets a bit complicated. So if we save that, we need to, we're going to test it and just test that works in our ping back in Teams and in the approval flow. So if we test that, we're going to need to do a new trigger action because we've got a different template now than we did before. So if we test that, get it so the flow little circles squiggling around. Right, if we go back into here, if we close that then. So in the business process, we'll probably tell people to keep the template as is. We'll make it read only so that you can't do that. You can't break anything. So we're going to copy it, make a copy, keep both, rename this one. And in your business process, you can come up with a naming convention. And then we're going to move that file into the submitted folder. Just going to kick off our flow, hopefully. If we go back to the flow, we'll hopefully now see it working. So we've got the dynamic approvers list in, which we know is working already. Hopefully then this is going to pull out some information out of the Excel file and populate it into our flow. So, no, it's failed. What's it say? No table was found with the name key info. So I might have picked up the wrong thing here. So maybe it wasn't file ID. Maybe we should have picked up identifier. Rather than using ID, use identifier. Let's see if that's going to work for us now. Always good to have real life examples of people going wrong, I find, because something probably will go wrong for you and need to get out of it yourself. So let's just double check we saved it, click test. We can use the trigger already because we know we've got the right template there. And hopefully now this is going to use dynamic list of emails and pull out the information right onto our Teams message with a bit of luck. So it looks like it's already posted into Team for us. Let's go and check it out. Yeah. So now we've got, so that's what we had before, approval submit successfully, test flow. Now we've got approval submit successfully, brand 1 approval needed. So that's actually the name. And when we pulled out some more detail into the description, we've now just added this thing saying this is for brand 1. Actually, it would be whatever your brand was. And then if we check out our approval flow, if I'll do it on here so it's easier than holding my phone up to the camera. We go into our approval step, received, and we should get the same thing in the description of our approval. So we've still got the same header. If we click on that, we should then get some more info, which will appear in the email as well. This is for brand 1. So that's how we've got the dynamic content coming out of Excel and straight into our approval, so people don't have to go and into the link and to get the information they need. Hopefully you found that useful. Remember to give the video a like if you liked it. Give us a thumbs down if you didn't like it. Let us know. We've got a new video on Teams coming out every Tuesday, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified every time we release a new video. Don't forget to get the free download button in the description below if you want the deck, either to train some other people in your organisation on Teams or to get all the tips that we've done on Teams all in one place. And then lastly, at MeeTime, we think that meetings in large organisations could be run a lot better if you've got an app in the iOS App Store to help do just that. Search for MeeTime or visit www.meetimeapps.com to find out more. Both those links are in the description below. Thanks for watching so far, and we'll see you next week to go through how to set this up to put everything into another SharePoint list, which we'll use as a tracker. Hopefully that'll be useful. See you next week.